Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your hosts, TV, aka TV on Basketball, alongside my co-host, Jay, aka the Knockdown Jay. How's it going, my guy?
It's going good, bro. Excellent basketball and upsets? What the
Like,
heck?
what is happening right now? There are like five or six series going 3-1 right now. Only one 2-2 series. These playoffs have been insane, bro. These playoffs have been absolutely insane. And we're going to talk about it all on today's episode. We're going to be talking about not even just playoff basketball. There's some coaching moves that are happening. We're going to get into that. And we're going to be talking about a lot about playoff basketball. So be on the lookout for this awesome episode. But before we start, we do have to plug our socials. Remember to follow our personals at the Knockdown J, at TV on Basketball, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. Our individual links will be down below. And in terms of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, remember to subscribe and leave a review of any of the podcast networks, Spotify or Apple. On YouTube, remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. And of course, remember to follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best daily NBA content. Jay, are you ready to talk about some playoff basketball? Actually, we'll save this playoff basketball. Are you ready to talk some coaching moves?
Bro, who thought we would be talking about coaches and firings and hirings in the middle of the playoffs?
In the middle of the playoffs, yeah. They have been two major news, especially from this week, but there are still two openings that we are going to be discussing. But we're going to start with the first hiring. Ime Udoka has been hired by the Houston Rockets to be their new head coach after not picking up the team option on Steven Silas earlier on in the playoffs. Jay, your initial thoughts on Ime Udoka going to the Houston Rockets?
So I think that Ime being there is an interesting test to see whether or not his tenure with the Boston Celtics was more built off of a roster that was already well prepared that just needed some polishing, a la the Mark Jackson to Steve Kerr transition, kind of similar. Maybe it could be viewed that way in terms of the transition from Brad Stevens to him, or if he has a little bit more of a developmental backbone, because that's what this Rocket team is going to need, right? The unfortunate thing is they're turning quickly into a team that's going to need to be good soon because of the way that the whole Brooklyn Nets trade with the Oklahoma City Thunder turned out. Both of those trades affected where I believe next year they won't have their draft pick. I think this year they have it, but next year they won't. So this upcoming season is very crucial for them in terms of making a legitimate push to maybe not be a playoff team, but they have to be much better than bottom 3 in the entire NBA.
Yeah.
I think we're going to learn a lot about Ime because of the fact that this will be his first time back in terms of the national media since his little incident. He's going to be in a very big market in the midst of doing that as well. And he's got a lot of personalities he's going to have to work with, which is also very interesting. Because Jalen Green is a young guy that's trying to go get his. Kevin Porter Jr. is a guy who still feels a little out of position, and I feel like to an extent he's still trying to find his footing in the NBA. I think there's a handful of guys on there. Like, for example, I really like Alperen Şengün, but can Ime bring out the Alperen that we need in order to really maximize that front court? Tari Eason, Jabari Smith, they got a lot of moving pieces and a lot of guys with a ton of potential. So it's going to be interesting to see if Ime's just the icing on the cake coach, or if he's a brick and mortar coach. You know what I mean? In terms of building a franchise up.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the biggest thing, like in terms of this Ime Udoka hiring from the Houston Rockets, is they just needed someone to set a culture. Because what the culture in Houston felt like was an AAU basketball team that was just there chucking shots left, right, and center. I mean, if you just look at the top guys, you have freaking Jabari Smith, Jalen Green, and Kevin Porter Jr. as your top your shot makers. These guys are not passing the ball to each other. Let's be completely honest. I mean, it's just like, it feels like a mess of a culture over there in like Houston like so far. I mean, even before Eric Gordon left, if you remember the comments he made, he's like, "Did you see that there's any progress that has been made this year compared to last year?" Nope. No progress has been made. So that just tells you like what you need to know in terms from a veteran perspective. So imagine how it felt like for Steven Silas, who, firstly, I thought he got dealt a bad card in the sense where he thought he was going to be coaching James Harden and trying to build around that. When right away that switch came when he had to get traded all the way to Brooklyn. So he's coming in now. He knows what he has. The problem is also what direction is the Houston Rockets is because the James Harden rumors to Houston, that might just throw a wrench into this whole thing. And there are some rumors as well that they might be trying to go after Jaylen Brown if he is still disgruntled with the Boston Celtics. So there's like, it feels like there is like a lot of still confusion over there in Houston. And I think what Ime Udoka has to go there and do is one, try to kind of like try and like save face for his like own sake, but also just try and develop a culture there in Houston, which I feel like has been lacking since the D'Antoni era, where when you go against Houston Rockets, what do you expect? A lot of threes, high octane offense. Or just a bunch of James Harden just shooting. That's just how it was with the Houston Rockets. At least there was a culture set there. Now, like in the Steven Silas era, you really didn't get that. You have some guys with a lot of talent there, like we mentioned, and Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, all the young guys that they have there. It's trying to put it together and try to make this team not so individual based, but try and just create a team culture.
Yeah, I think another thing that's like a big wild card. I think like real NBA heads will pay attention to this, but for the casual fan, this is just a name to keep in mind. Tillman Fertitta.
Yes.
He is the head honcho for the Houston Rockets. He's also the cheapest individual you'll meet that has $1 million plus in his pocket.
Yes.
So it's going to be interesting to see because he seems like a guy who wants to win, but he wants to win on a budget. And we have way too many teams that are not fans of going into the luxury tax and making significant big number signings. And we understand what the results of that are. TV, we had a great conversation a couple weeks back about teams like the Portland Trail Blazers and the Washington Wizards bumping their heads on the fact that they cannot build around their superstars under the mentality that they're working with right now.
Yeah.
The Houston Rockets are in a very similar space and they need to pick a lane. I think they are going the developmental route, but I think that they also need to meet themselves in the middle and realize if they're going to do that, they need to siphon out who are the guys that we want to be here long term versus who are the guys that are not going to be able to uplift us to whatever this next generation of Rockets basketball looks like. Tillman Fertitta is huge in all of this because there's two things that this team desperately needs. A better voice at the head coaching spot in terms of being heard. I think they address that in a big way, especially if Ime comes in and projects his abilities up front and from the get-go. I think the other thing too is you mentioned the AU basketball element. I think there does need to be some veteran leadership in here, but there has to be a certain way that they go about it. John Wall thought he was playing with James Harden. Eric Gordon was with the team that was making the playoffs every single year. You know what I mean? They were a part of that older generation of the Rockets before the losing began. They need vets that are coming in there with the understanding that they're playing that role, not the role of trying to play for
A
the next
championship.
contract
Yeah.
or even championship basketball, right? That's not where they're at. That's John Wall and Eric Gordon. They were bamboozled. That's the best way to put it. They might come off as the bad guys, but they're the ones who were treated unfairly. They were the ones that were just as blindsided as maybe Rockets fans were in terms of where they stand moving forward. All of this. So I hope that they address the veteranship just as much as they address the coach. The coach still under question. I will say that.
Yeah.
But thankfully, his issues are more off the court than they are on the court. His on the court production is something that we can definitely work with, and I think that Houston should be happy that they were the team that was able to get him in the door.
Yeah, 100%. And just to your point about Tillman Fertitta, I mean, he is someone who like you mentioned, one of the cheapest like owners like in the is it like owners of like front office like players like people like in the league. There was a clip of him earlier this year. I think he was in Mardi Gras or something. He was happy that the Rockets were losing, man. He was happy that the Rockets were losing. He's like, yes, tank for Wembanyama. That's what he was saying, something along those lines, like a few months ago. So yeah, they just gotta like pick a lane. I know there's like these things about James Harden coming up. That's not the I don't agree in that sense of where you gotta like try to go in that direction to try and accelerate the rebuild or the retooling or whatever. I think that them committing to this and having like a clear goal for Ime going forward is something that could be really positive for this team, just knowing where they are and just moving forward to see like what type of like team that people will be expecting when they bring in some players, when they bring in the veterans. So yes, pick one lane, go for it. I think that Udoka is gonna like Ime is gonna do a good job. I think that he, um, again, sets a culture, just kind of like realizes like what each of this like kind of just sets rules for each of these guys from this team, and it's just something, just some sort of stability at the head coaching position. And I think that Ime will be able to do that. But that was just one coach filling that happened. There are still two. There are still two that are in the NBA right now, and one of them opened up this week as my Toronto Raptors parted ways with NBA champion head coach Nick Nurse. Sad day for Raptors fans. I one thing before we move forward. I've seen Raptor fans try to put this guy down. This guy brought us a championship. He's clearly the best coach in our franchise's history, highest winning percentage and all that. One coach of the year. All nothing but praise for Nick Nurse for what he's been able to do with the Toronto Raptors franchise after coming in and basically just inheriting Kawhi Leonard, trying to like having like you're talking about like being bamboozled. This guy thought he was dealing with a DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry, potentially rebuilding team. Nope. Masai Ujiri comes in, brings in Kawhi Leonard, and the whole thing changed. We have to win now, and he was able to do that. Brought us a championship. All the praise goes to Nick Nurse. So that position opened up. Jay, quick thoughts on the Raptors firing Nick Nurse before we move forward?
I mean, to keep it a buck with you, bro, the more I think about it, the more I just wonder like what made them feel like they needed to pull that trigger. I did look at his coaching resume recently, and he hasn't made a ton of noise since the championship. It's pretty much either been a first round exit or missing the playoffs, unless I misread something.
Mm-hmm.
So I do understand that, but see the weird part about that, and I saw a post on this the other day, and this is my way, I guess, of reversing it back to the Raptors fan, but the weird part about it to me is Nick Nurse did exactly what he was supposed to do. He did exactly. TV, we've had this conversation off camera. This is why I want to pass it back to you. Nick Nurse is a coach that came from the G League Raptors 905 team. You mentioned beforehand he came to a DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry team that seemed like they needed to retool and develop young to adequately meet the older guys at the top who were the catalyst to a lot of those playoff runs that they were having before his arrival. Nick Nurse developed Fred VanVleet into a one-time All-Star, Pascal Siakam into a multi-time All-Star
And
/
All-NBA.
All-NBA caliber guy. OG Anunoby was one of the most coveted guys at the trade deadline this season.
Mm-hmm.
Jakob Poeltl, I think, is a guy who could really stick on this team after some of the things that we saw with the back season that he was acquired.
Mm-hmm.
Scotty Barnes won Rookie of the Year. And yet, it's almost like people are viewing his tenure as a failure for some reason.
Oh, no way. No way that Nick Nurse's tenure was a failure. He just got dealt so many different cards, whether it was just the recent, like the crazy addition of Kawhi Leonard, the fact that he left after a year and had to try and build up that team, and he won Coach of the Year. He still brought them to a top 3 seed in the East, to moving to Tampa, to trying to rebuild, try to build around Scotty. Just so many hands dealt to him, and he was able to kind of pass all those tests with flying colors. The only really disappointing year I would have to say would probably be this year, because we did have a bit more expectations. But besides that fact, I think that he's done a good job. And I guess as a final thought, it's one of those things where after a while, I just feel like the same voice in the locker room for so long, after like hearing the same sort of principles, hearing the same sort of philosophy, I just think they just need a different voice in the locker room. I just think that he ended up like losing the locker room, especially with all this losing, and trying to figure out what is the balance here. Do we want to win? Do we want to develop the young guys? Like he was caught at this crossroads from the organization because the organization said, "Look, we have a bunch of these young guys. We want them playing minutes, but they're not contributing to wins, and we still want to be a winning team." So what did Nick Nurse tried to do? He tried playing his older guys a bunch of minutes. So he was like at a crossroads, and I think that was like an unfortunate situation for him to be put in. And I think it's just unfair to kind of put all the blame on him. But someone had to be a scapegoat for this freaking crazy year that we had. So unfortunately, it had to be Nick Nurse.
TV, you want to know the crazy? The reason why I was laughing is you want to know the craziest
Jesus.
part, bro, about this
But
whole thing. It sounded like you described my Chicago Bulls.
yeah,
Yet we only have one playoff appearance in Billy Donovan's tenure to
yeah,
show for it.
hmm
Yet he's the one that got a contract extension during the season.
yeah,
That's the insane. Like that's why I go back to looking back at the thing with Nick Nurse. And it's like they make him seem villainous because how did he get fired? Essentially doing what he did, all kind of in what I would view as overachieving,
yeah,
as opposed to Billy Donovan, who pretty much had a flash in the pan year and got paid for it.
yeah,
It's crazy to think about the fact that head coaches can get the Duncan Robinson syndrome, but like,
yeah.
I mean, hey, it is what it is. But I think no matter where Nick Nurse ends up next, he's gonna be solid. I think he did
He
exactly
will
what
be.
he was supposed to do with the Toronto Raptors. And if it was as simple as the voice weighing on deaf ears, I think that's okay. But I think I agree with you 100%. I don't think you can walk away from Nick Nurse's tenure and say that he did not maximize what the Toronto Raptors were supposed to be under the circumstances that he was coming into.
Yeah, and it's just a lot of recency bias. This season was honestly, in the eyes of many Raptor fans, was a full out failure. We didn't commit to a rebuild. We didn't commit to going all in. And what did it lead to? A freaking elimination in the playing tournament by your Chicago Bulls. So, exactly, I think that's just the case, and it's just like a lot of recency bias. But we can't take away the fact that he has been the most successful Raptors coach in the last 4 or 5 years. But that's not only the only opening in the NBA that we have. We also have the Detroit Pistons opening because Dwayne Casey did not get fired, but he ended up being promoted to a front office position, so that space opened up. But in terms of this discussion, Jay, I'm going to throw this question over to you. If you were a head coach looking at both the situation of the Detroit Pistons and the Toronto Raptors, which one would you say is more desirable at this current moment?
I think now that's the funny thing because you mentioned at this current moment. That I think is so important to contextualize because I think at this current moment, both of these teams are in two totally different tracks in their quote unquote
Hmm.
lives, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
in terms of where they stand um in their agendas. I think that the Raptors are a new voice away from getting their stuff together. I think there was a lot of stuff this year where I think teams were just not impressed by a bunch of 6'9" guys flying around.
Yeah.
I also think that we have a good beat on the fact that the Tom Thibodeau run your guys 45 minutes a game thing is not sustainable.
Yeah.
And Nick Nurse fell into that trap as well. I think under some different circumstances, they have a coachable team that is ready to make some significant noise. I think we need to look at the Toronto Raptors more for the team they were at the back half of the year after the All-Star break last season
Yeah.
as opposed to this year. I think
Yeah.
if you view them more through that lens, they are a much more desirable place to coach than they might look coming off of the way this year ended. I think something else that's notable is you have guys that if you needed to blow this up, there's a lot of different avenues you could take. Now, the only guy that you have to worry about, and this is something where I think a head coach, if you're smart,
Mm-hmm.
will not take the job until you identify what is happening with this guy. And the question is Toronto bringing back Fred VanVleet?
Yeah.
That to me, and you can give your own insight on this as the Raptors fan, because I think it's kind of maybe it's not as important as I'm making it. Maybe it actually is. I think what they choose to do with Fred VanVleet will tell you whether they are choosing to move forward or take a step back.
Okay. First thoughts on the Fred VanVleet situation. I think the Raptors have no choice but to bring it back. That's the only issue, because there is no like in the current market, there's no really like a suitable replacement that we can get for him with the money that we have. Because even if we don't bring him back, we just don't have the money to even go after someone. Say, for example, like a Tyus Jones, who could be like a solid, starting point guard in the NBA. Like we just don't have that type of money for something that he would want. At least with Fred, we have his bird rights. We can go over to cap to sign him, or even if we want to trade him, we're gonna need to re-sign him at some point and just pay him the money. In terms of like that, I think what really is like important to see, especially for this year, and especially for any coach coming in to know like what route the Raptors are gonna go, is see what they're gonna do with Pascal, because I think he is the one who is the kind of the deciding factor whether we go all in or not even all out, but like in some sort of a retool, because he is the biggest question mark whether he can work beside Scotty Barnes, because the only like true piece that's going to be like consistent there for the next how many years, say if a coach signs there for 5 years, Scotty Barnes is probably going to be that one guy who's going to be there for the duration of the 5 years. At least that's the plan anyway. So what they're going to do with Pascal is going to tell you which direction they see Scotty and how they see the rest of this team. In terms of a more desirable position, though, low key, I'm saying this as a Raptors fan. I low key I like the Pistons situation better, just because less expectations, you have a clean slate, and you just have a bunch of young guys that at least proved when Kate Cunningham is on the court that they can be competitive. Yes, they had the worst record in basketball. I do understand that, but there's a bunch of young guys where, I mean, you compare this situation to the Houston Rockets situation. There was no noise coming out of this camp. And when there's no noise coming out of the Detroit Pistons, you know things are going well. The Houston Rockets, they were in the news all season long for all the wrong reasons. So that just tells you a lot about the Detroit Pistons culture. And I mean, you talked about it before. In terms of bringing in like veterans that know that their role and what they're going to do going forward, they brought in Bojan Bogdanovic. You already have like a nice starting piece there. You have players such as Alec Burks. You have players like Corey Joseph, who are veterans there that know their roles and what they could provide to this team. And then you have a bunch of young guys that can really like take you to the next level, whether it's a Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, a good season this year from Jalen Duren. And then you have some projects there at players such as James Wiseman, Marvin Bagley, Isaiah Stewart, Killian Hayes. There's just a bunch of guys there with untapped potential and who could garner some interest around the league in terms of trade pieces. I just think that when you're in the Pistons situation, you have a lot more leeway, you have a lot less expectations, and if you overachieve, it's more of a pleasant surprise than it is like a major disappointment. Especially now coming off a year where Kate Cunningham had season-ending surgery. Going into next year, again, less expectations. You're gonna have another high draft pick. Imagine this team if they add Victor Wembanyama. That changes everything, as well. There's just a lot of like nice, like there's just a lot of like favorable pieces. And compared to the Raptors situation, yes, they do. They have potential guys that they could trade. They have no draft picks. For some reason, the Raptors traded the 24 draft pick for Jakob Poeltl, and it's top six protected. Good job, Masai. But at the end of the day, I think just because of like the potential pieces that you have, and you also like just potential of like trading pieces as well, I would go with the Detroit job.
Now, I think the only thing that would counteract the Detroit job is I think there's still too much wild card in Detroit. For example, Troy Weaver has like an obsession with picking up big men that can't shoot. Marvin
Wiseman and Bagley.
Bagley, James Wiseman, Isaiah Stewart to a certain degree.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that kind of hurts the optimization of your team, especially
Yeah.
around a guy like Cade Cunningham. I still think we're asking ourselves who exactly Killian Hayes is, which is a big thing considering he's been in the league for a couple of seasons now. We're still kind of trying to get an understanding of what his fit is. And it's definitely not next to Cade Cunningham. So that's
Yeah.
definitely one of those things that definitely hurts. I think Jaden Ivey gave us a really great first season, but his most notable hole is something that also stood out with Jalen Green, which was his efficiency issues. He
Yeah.
picked it up towards the back end of the season, but I think that that's going to be really important as a guy who plays next to Cade Cunningham, and they're kind of high volume. I think they're going to be a team that's going to want to run and gun a lot.
Mhm.
And I hope there's a team. I mean, I hope there's a coach that looks to take advantage of that. And I like Jalen Duren. We talked a little bit off camera. I think he might have the most upside of anybody outside of Cade Cunningham, honestly.
Mhm.
That even includes Jaden.
Yeah.
I think when you look at both of these teams, I was thinking about this a little bit while we were talking before we hopped on, because our original question was going to be who would be some good candidates for these teams. And I kind of did still give it some thought. I think that when you mention little expectations, still a very much developmental situation, I think a guy like Kenny Atkinson would be great for this team.
Yes.
And I think when you think about a team like the Toronto Raptors, a name that has not been thrown out in a while, but I think would be a really interesting fit is Frank Vogel. The
Mhm.
last time Frank Vogel got a defensive minded, defensive oriented team, they won the championship.
Mhm.
Now, granted, that team had LeBron James and Anthony
And Anthony
Davis.
Davis.
Completely
Yes.
understandable. But the last time that he got a defensive oriented team, they went to the championship. When he built the Indiana Pacers off the backbone of defensive versatility and Roy Hibbert in the middle, they were a perennial playoff team that made significant runs year after year after year. That I would make the argument that probably more than even my Chicago Bulls with Derrick Rose, probably gave those Miami Heat teams the most
Most
work
problems. Yeah.
in terms of the year to year runs in the Eastern Conference. So I think that a guy like Frank Vogel has the ability to maybe reinstill something like that in the mix for a team like Toronto that has some significant defensive versatility. I think they definitely have to bring Jakob Poeltl back now after the trade they did in
Yeah.
terms of the value of the draft pick they have. He's a really good guy in the middle, and I think him and Scotty Barnes' rapport really
Yeah.
kicked in really solid this back half of the year. And I think with a full season of establishing that, we could see some really good play from that duo as well, along with the fact that you still have Pascal, you have OG in a contract year, which means it's probably ball out time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then obviously Fred Van Vliet will be coming off of getting the paycheck, so hopefully he'll show out.
Mhm.
I think that when you put those names in the right positions, there could be something to that. Now, there's probably a couple of other coaches that come to mind. For example, I saw something that said Earl Watson, who's on you guys' assistant coaching
Yeah.
staff, is a guy that might be really interesting to retain and elevate.
Mhm.
That could be an interesting name. He's a guy that's very familiar with some superstars around the league.
Yeah.
It's hard to get guys in Toronto, but if you got the right head man,
Yeah.
maybe you can call some people up.
Mhm.
So there's that. It's going to be interesting to see who decides to go with these jobs, and it'll be probably more interesting. I mentioned the Fred Van Vliet thing earlier. It'll be interesting to see when these coaches decide to take their
Yeah.
job. For example, Quinn Snyder took the Atlanta Hawks job
Mhm.
smack in the middle of the season. It's an
Yeah.
interesting thing to do coming off of a team that had a ton of toxicity towards the beginning portion of the season. They made one of the biggest trades in franchise history over the offseason,
Mhm.
and they already have rescinded a lot of it kind of through the fact that it seems like on terms of on the court, Trae Young and DeJounte Murray aren't working. I think
Mhm.
they're a good pairing, but I don't think it's working in terms of
Yeah.
what it could really look like at its height. Um, and I think a similar thing can be said for these two other teams in the sense that I think we don't really know what works for them just yet. And
Mhm.
it'll be interesting to see which coaches step up and then also are able to optimize that. So those are just some names I thought of just
Yeah.
because we were originally going to talk about that a little bit.
Mhm.
But I think both jobs are favorable for their own.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. And I mean, you mentioned about like, the direction like the Raptors will go. I think the coach tells a lot about that story too. If they decide to go with someone like a Frank Vogel, then you know they want to retool. They know they want to compete. If they go with like an Earl Watson, or if they want to go with like a new head coach, for example, Charles Lee, assistant coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, then you can tell what type of direction that they want to go. They want to go a developmental route. They want to try and get these like try to build like this young core, this young culture, stuff like that. And I think yeah, like you mentioned, both teams are desirable for their own in their own ways, and I think that I even though I do favor the Pistons position, I do think whoever comes into the Raptors has a lot of what I would say a lot of like tools at their disposal to see like what they could do, especially defensively. I think if you find the right coach, you could really unlock this team. And in terms of defensive aspect, offensively, that's a whole other story. But there's definitely like some good between any of these two teams. I do like the candidates you mentioned too, because especially that Frank Vogel one, especially me and my boy, we've been talking about it, and he's been mentioning Frank Vogel, man. Frank Vogel could be that guy if Messiah is all about retooling. He is definitely someone to be on the lookout for in Toronto. Um, Before we move on to some playoff talk, I did want to mention that there were two more awards. Actually, one award got announced as in the middle of recording this, so we will discuss that too. Firstly, Laurie Markkinen winning MIP over Jalen Brunson and Shea Gilgeous Alexander. Jay, any thoughts on this? Do you think that was a correct winner?
So TV, you called it Laurie Markkinen as your winner when we went through the awards. Me personally, I still feel like Shea deserved it a little bit more. This is a guy who had his team on the brink of the playoffs, really changed the culture for his team, and took a leap that I think. Yes, Laurie became a first-time All-Star, but so did Shea Gilgeous Alexander. Yes, Laurie might be an All NBA big this year, but Shea Gilgeous Alexander might be a first team All NBA guard this year
Hmm.
in a grouping that is a dogfight. Because mind you, this ain't in the West. This is in the
Yeah,
league. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? So I still think that he may have been more deserving, but shout out to my boy Laurie nonetheless. And my boy's going out to war now, so hey man, just stay safe and stay in the mix. But yeah, I mean, I think he's still a deserving candidate. I think either one of these three guys winning, I can live with. It's just it varies in terms of who I believe is the most deserving.
yeah. No, 100%. I did have Laurie as my winner going in after the season ended. Fantastic season. It's just something that we just didn't expect him to see as well. I think the surprise factor really did show for Laurie because at least with Shade, there was like kind of hints that he could be this type of guy. Laurie just came out of freaking nowhere. There's no way that you could say that Laurie Markkinen was going to be like a potential All NBA guy when they made that trade for him in the offseason. So I completely get it. If you like would say Shogos Alexander, or even if you have the case for Jalen Brunson, he's been absolutely fantastic this year, borderline All Star as well. But yeah, Laurie Markkinen winning it, very happy with that. Like you mentioned, man, stay safe out there, Laurie. Stay there. Protect your country, but stay safe out there. The Utah Jazz need you next year. But like I mentioned, and then the award was announced during the recording of this podcast. Paolo Banchero, I don't think this was any surprise to anyone, wins Rookie of the Year. Do we even have to comment about this?
I mean, I think it's good to see that voters kept it 100 instead of, playing around with it and try to make it more interesting than it actually should have been. I think Jalen Williams made a great second half push. I think Walker Kessler has a case to be on like the all NBA defensive team. I think he has a really strong case to be on the all NBA defensive team as a rookie.
Yes.
But Paolo Banchero was just different. I think he
Yeah.
was he was just different. His impact was different. And I think if this Orlando Magic team didn't have a rotation of guards that have been in and out of the lineup, they don't really have optimized shooting on the lineup.
Yeah.
Franz Wagner's role changed a little bit from last season to this season, where been a lot more of a ball handler this year as opposed to last year. Paulo Banchero didn't have a ton of efficiency, but again, I've touched on this a ton when talking about Paulo. Those free throw numbers scream at you that once this guy gets a hold of the game, his physicality being an icing on the cake for that is gonna make him like I think he could be like a Joel Embiid light level dominant
Hmm.
kind of player with his
Yeah.
physicality because I think he can get out and run in ways that Joel can't. I think he can create for himself off the dribble in ways that Joel can't because he's a little smaller, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Hmm.
While also having the physicality to be a free throw merchant if need be. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like
yeah,
you
I
gotta do
get
what you
it.
gotta do
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
And I think that he has a lot in front of him. Shout out to Jalen Williams. Shout out to Walker Kessler as well. But I just think Paulo Banchero was just too different, bro. He was just
yeah.
too different.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one guy, if you told me in this entire draft class that stood out, it was Paolo. He was the one who showed that he can be the number one option. He's the one who showed that star slash superstar type of potential from this year, and he was given the keys to the car right away. And mind you, the Magic were not bad. They were not a bad team, especially that late push at the end. They were like a decently close to potentially, if it wasn't, for being so far down earlier, to potentially even get into a play-in spot. So if especially with the form they had at the end of the season, and Paulo Banchero was the catalyst of that. They brought him in to be that guy, and he has proven that he has the potential to do it. I mean, like I meant, like just to go through the stats, 27-4, very very good stats as a rookie. He's going to be someone that they're going to build around going forward. He 100% deserves this. I don't care what that. He didn't win it unanimously. He should have won it unanimously, but the one Utah guy decided to go with Walker Kessler because because of metrics. So, but yeah, congratulations to Paolo Banchero. Congratulations to Lauri Markkanen. Both very deserving winners of those respective awards. Let's get into some playoff basketball. And I mean, I think last episode we were not going to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers sweeping the Brooklyn Nets because we basically wrote the obituary for the Nets already last episode. But there's still a series that's still like pretty interesting. I mean, a lot of them are 3-1s right now, but one series, man, 2-2. It's been an excellent series so far. The Golden State Warriors versus the Sacramento Kings. Both teams took two games each at home. But the sad story, man. De'Aaron Fox going down with an injury, fracturing his hand in practice. Now reports say he is playing tomorrow, but he will be playing hobbled. He will be not at 100%. But man, this feels like a repeating story for the Golden State Warriors when it comes to them in the championship runs. Looking back at the year that they won their first championship, winning because Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving were not in the lineup. You can look at years after that when there were just injuries to Kawhi Leonard, injuries to Chris Paul. There have been so many examples. But Jay, have has those injuries do you think that the Warriors have been very injury lucky in their dynasty run so far?
I feel like it's safe to say they were, but I feel like it all compounded in the series against the Raptors. Like I feel like if that's how you felt about their runs up until that point, then I would say the universe giveth and taketh, right? So in this case, they giveth you a handful of championships off the strength of taking down a few teams that were a smidget hobbled, maybe a lot of hobbled.
Mm-hmm.
And then you lose your best player, arguably at the time, then remotely lose him via sign and trade
Yeah.
after, right? And you lose your third best player at the time for 2 seasons,
Mm-hmm.
Clay Thompson, due to injury in that same series.
Yeah.
So I would say, like I said, the universe giveth and taketh. Yes, you may have gotten a couple of championships off the strength of injury luck being in your favor, but the trade-off was you lost a championship and you lost another season. Remember, that season that Klay Thompson was out also was followed by a tough year for Steph Curry, and Draymond Green was kind of running solo, and they lost the entire season,
Yeah.
which led to James Wiseman. So yes, you won a handful of championships, but you lost a finals, you lost a season, and you had a very rough season the year after, which led to another championship eventually. But here we are once again, where we are kind of back in the middle, wondering about you as a team. So I think that they've had a healthy medium of both. And as a team that is always in the mix every year, you're going to have that.
Yeah. I think what this has showed us, and I don't think it has to do with just the Warriors in general. You just need injury luck, man. You just need injury luck no
Facts.
matter what, and it's just something inevitable that's going to happen. I mean, you go through an 82 game regular season, you go through these grueling playoffs where it just becomes like the intensity becomes that much higher, where the physicality just goes that much higher. You know what I mean? So when you have like that type of stuff happening, injuries are just a part of a game. It just comes naturally. And like you mentioned the Toronto Raptors here, even when they lost to the Cavs when they were down 3-1, it was, you know, the Draymond Green game suspended. That kind of like that tilted the series in their favor. Granted, they still should have won that. They 100% should have still won that. But that was a deciding factor. When you have that going up against you, yes, they've had some luck. I mean, I even mentioned it last year when they faced the Grizzlies in the second round. John Morant was kind of in and out the lineup. He was not at 100% as well. So it's just part of this. It's just part of like winning a championship, and like it's just part of. You can just go through like each of these championships as far as back as you could possibly think, and there's always going to be that one injury. There's always going to be something that's going to pop up. I think like this discussion about the Warriors being injury lucky is because, like you mentioned, they're just there all the time. They're just there all the time. That's why this discussion is even possible. If it was a variety of teams, like you can look through each of those teams. They've got lucky in a sense, and I even agree to the fact that my Toronto Raptors winning this championship right here, we wouldn't have won that if KD and Clay were healthy. Yeah, I mean that's just the way it is. And sometimes you just like you're always, of course, you're dealt with the cards that you're given, and you just have to respond. And they've been able to respond. That's why they've become one of the best teams of this generation. That's what they've been shown that they could do. So yeah, I mean it is what it is, but at the same time, I think it's just something that's common with like just everything for like a long, grueling NBA season.
Well, TV, here's the one thing though. I do want to ask you this. Like, are we having this conversation because we have a weird feeling that this series is over? Because I don't feel like
think
it's
so
over
either.
at all. I feel like all the Warriors have done so far is play to exactly who we thought they were coming into the postseason. We told ourselves, just based off regular season understanding alone, that the best case scenario for the Warriors to win in the first round against a Sacramento team like this one would be off the strength of what got them through the regular season. They might lose the first two at home, but they're gonna have to get them back when they go back to go back to the crib. They handled their business. Granted, one of those games they won 126 to 125 and nearly lost it off of a Harrison Barnes three that's definitely should have went in. If we're gonna be honest, this man, he just botched it. It was an open look.
Yeah.
Hardly had it was a late contest. Probably should have ended the game. So let's be real. So there's that as well. We're going back to Golden One now, right?
Yeah.
Up in the air, but I told you I had Golden State. I told you I had Golden State in 6 or 7.
Yeah.
For them to do that, they'd have to win Game 5. But I think history so far, just going based off this season, has shown us that Sacramento should win this game tonight.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, history has also shown us that Golden State should win when they go back.
Yeah.
To San Francisco, and Game 7 will make its call. So as far as I'm concerned, injury luck is big in terms of talking about De'Aaron Fox being hobbled, knowing what he means to Sacramento Kings. But I think so far, regardless of circumstance, this series has gone kind of exactly how we expected it to go.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And the only reason this discussion is even happening is like if the Warriors do win, this conversation is going to be brought up and saying, "Oh, it's happening again. The Warriors lucked out. If De'Aaron Fox was 100%, they would have won it." That's the only reason why it's happening. De'Aaron Fox said in an interview before this, we record this podcast. There's no way that he was going to miss this game. He's going to still give us 100%. The Kings are still healthy. Besides that fact, whatever happens. This, like you mentioned, the series is going exactly how we expected it to go. De'Aaron Fox absolutely killing it right now. The way that the Warriors were able to bounce back at the Chase Center, there's nothing surprising here. Nothing surprising here so far. And I think that this whole injury look thing is, again, if the Warriors come out of it, that's just another thing saying, oh, they avoided it again. They dodge another bullet. It happens, man. It just happens throughout every playoff run. You can't tell me that there's one championship team that hadn't get some injury luck on their side. So that's just the case of, being so good for so long, I guess, if you're the Warriors, always being in that position. So if anything, that's a testament to how great that you guys have been for the past decade. Moving on to the other series, though, like I mentioned, that is the only series that's 2-2. The rest of these series are 3-1, and honestly, a surprising 3-1 at that. A lot of these series, like it's a lot of series to get through. So we're gonna try to keep it kind of short and succinct through some sort of way of judging whether we think these teams come back. So I'm gonna be giving you a team, Jay, who is down 3-1, and then we're gonna both give our rating on a scale from 1 to 10. How likely is it that they are able to come back from a 3-1 deficit? We're gonna go through each of the series. We're not gonna talk about maybe the series as a whole, but is it possible for these teams to come back? I'm gonna hit you with a heavy one right away.
Huh?
The Milwaukee Bucks are down 3-1 to the Heat. The Milwaukee Bucks are down 3-1 to the Heat. More specifically, the Bucks are down to freaking playoff Jimmy. Playoff Jimmy has. If you didn't think that this is a real thing, I don't know what to tell you, man. Especially like last night's performance, 56 points, and the way that he was able to take over the first and fourth quarters was absolutely insane. If you don't believe in playoff Jimmy, you have to believe him now. How likely is it the Milwaukee Bucks come back in the series? They were the championship favorites going into these playoffs.
Yeah, and they were my lead guys to pretty much. If I remember, I told you one of my biggest predictions going into the playoffs was that I was worried about the Boston Celtics, and that it would be the winner of it would be the Milwaukee Bucks or the Philadelphia 76ers that would be the team to take them out. Obviously the Sixers are in a solid position, but with Joel Embiid's injury, it's not looking as great too much. And Milwaukee, very questionable right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think my rating would be a 5, and I think it's because at the end of the day, if you have Giannis, you have a chance.
Yeah.
I think but that's literally all I'm going off of. Right?
Yeah.
If you have Giannis, you have a chance. Without Giannis Antetokounmpo, Drew Holiday has had to be the lead guy. That's not gonna cut it. And I think this Miami Heat team, we talked about in our preview, the thing that was gonna give Miami a chance, right? Which is why we said that they would be much more formidable against this team as opposed to like my Chicago Bulls, for example. Was because the defensive versatility and physicality, I keep saying it, of the Miami Heat is going to help them in a series against a team like Milwaukee that plays through the paint and then pushes out. They play inside-out basketball, and your ability to switch and be physical both on the inside and the perimeter allows you to match up well with that. And that's why Miami always gives the Milwaukee Bucks some problems. But like you said, playoff Jimmy is real, and that's why the other 5 is there, because he only needs one game to get her done.
Yeah. It's honestly just been insane to watch. Not just this season for Jimmy Butler, like this playoff run. Every playoff run he has, I think besides maybe that one series he had against the was it the Boston Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks where they got swept and like he just played absolutely horrible. Like I think it was like the year after the championship. But besides that, every single year he's been in the playoffs. Just an absolute playoff masterclass. One of the best, honestly, playoff performers of our generation. He has just been that good in these situations. In terms of my rating for this team, it's just, I think, like you mentioned, the physicality of this Miami Heat team is really like matching up with the Milwaukee Bucks. And Giannis not 100%. Yeah. You need a 35-point Brook Lopez game to even stay in this game because Chris Middleton has still not looked the same. And Drew Holiday, he could do as much as he can. Yesterday, he just kept chucking up shots this guy was like hitting thought that every like good shot was him taking a contested 3. Like it got really bad there for Drew Holiday. But in terms of like this like Miami Heat team, they play physical, whether it's their smallest guy on the court and Kyle Lowry. I mean, that key turnover at the end of like the last game just shows that like the grit and determination of this team stretches from him all the way to Bam Adebayo, who is one of the best defenders in the league. Like it just like that's when it goes from like 1 to 10 on this lineup, even without Tyler Hero. I have to give this rating for the Milwaukee Bucks. I think it's at a 3. I honestly think it's even lower than 5. And again, I am basing this purely off of Giannis. I don't think like if Giannis was not a factor, I would not give this team a chance to come back from 3-1. Because Jimmy Butler has just been that good, and the rest of these guys, sure, maybe they're not hitting the shots that they have in previous years, but they're fighting hard defensively. They are hitting shots when they matter. Caleb Martin hit 2 threes at the end of the last game. I mean, who thought Caleb Martin was going to be that much of a difference maker on this team when they brought him in? So I think at this point, I mean, all of the momentum the Bucks had coming into this season, having the best record in the league, all of that, That Giannis injury really took the wind out of their sails, and now him coming back and not winning that game when he came back is going to be absolutely detrimental. And I think it almost spells the end for the Milwaukee Bucks, but you just can't take them out of it with Giannis on our roster.
Yeah, Giannis X Factor, man. I never thought I'd say that, but Giannis X Factor, bro. For
You need
real.
Giannis X Factor. You need Giannis averaging honestly 35 plus to the rest of the series for
For real.
him to have a chance because Jimmy Butler is going to shut the door whenever possible, like he did in that last game.
Yeah.
This one should go a lot quicker. The Boston Celtics are up 3-1 on the Atlanta Hawks. Now, the Hawks did win Game 3. Very admirable Game 3 performance. It was very much shades of that play-in game versus the Miami Heat where everyone contributed.
Yeah.
But after a loss in Game 4 where they, again, put up a good fight, DeJounte Murray will not be playing in Game 5 because he bumped shoulders with a ref, which means that he is suspended for Game 5. Jay, if you have any thoughts on this suspension, put that out there. But also give a rating. This series feels like it's over.
In the words of Kendrick Perkins, Cero, man. Cero. Okay. They're getting up out of here, bro. I gave them 5 games. When we did our preview, I picked them to lose in 5. They stole a game off the strength of Trae Young and DeJounte Murray playing very well, as I expected. I expected them to at least get one because they're still a talented squad. But I just think that Boston is just too versatile for them. And I think their switchability is just one of those things that puts them in a position when you have a undersized guard and another guard who relies mainly on mid-rangers to be able to create offense efficiently. The Celtics are built to handle that. They're fine. They're okay with you doing things that way because they have the guys to measure up against that on a night-to-night basis while also having guys offensively that can trade who's the best player for that night.
Yeah.
So I think Atlanta gets it. I think Atlanta gets up out of here tonight, as of when we're recording this.
Yeah, the DeJounte Murray factor just completely takes the sails out of this game because honestly, the last 2 games they have been very competitive. They won Game 3, and even in Game 4, they definitely had their chances. It's just that Boston Celtics were just too good, and every time the Atlanta Hawks made a run, the Celtics always had a response, which has been their calling card, not just this season, but also last season. So if there was a 0 on the scale, which I'm going to put, I would give it a 0 right now, especially without DeJounte Murray. But I think, and I'm going to throw this question back to you.
Okay.
The Atlanta Hawks very much underwhelmed this season, and I think a lot of people are questioning as well whether this team would be formidable going forward, especially because DeJounte Murray's contract is going to be up soon. Should they stick to this core, potentially trading Trae Young? I think that this series has shown that that there's something there. I think that this series has showed so far that there's something there. Maybe work with the surrounding parts of it. Finally get rid of John Collins, please, for goodness sake. That trade has to happen at some point. But I feel like with the young guys coming off their bench and the way that they've been producing in the play-in as well as the playoffs so far, and we could see how good DeJounte Murray and Trae Young have been, I feel a lot more confident in this Hawks team going forward than I did probably before the playoffs even started.
I think that you make a solid point, but I think the way I look at this series is it reveals more how much of a mistake they made with how they conducted their offseason aside from DeJounte Murray. If you look at a lot of the things that happened, most notably the head of this is Kevin Huerter in terms of them watching their shooting go out the door. Bogdanovich was injured for a majority of the season. He's another guy that tends to shoot at a decent clip for them as well. He's still on the roster, but his injury history is starting to pile up. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that's starting to make him a little bit of a flight risk. And it's funny because this offseason, he's due for a contract extension. And the question the Atlanta Hawks have to ask him is, do you really think you're worth $20 million with the fact that you haven't been able to stay on the floor very consistently for us?
Yeah.
If they can get him on a cheaper deal, I think Bogey is somebody worth having a real conversation about bringing back. But if he wants $20 million, I don't think the Atlanta Hawks are the team for him. But I think this series reveals more than ever that shooting that got them to the Eastern Conference Finals 2 seasons ago cannot be underlooked. I think that's overlooked, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that was their calling card, was that they had floor spacing across the board. If you remember early on that year before the injury, DeAndre Hunter was having the year of his life. before the
Yes.
injury, right? And I think that's something else that
Yes.
could really be a telling situation if they can get a little, even a revitalized version of that
Mm-hmm.
next season. I agree with you. I think there's certain things that they can work with off this year, along with a full season with Quinn Snyder. It was a lot of bad vibes in the beginning of the
Yeah.
season. And the DeJounte Murray acquisition was kind of the only net positive, but a
Yeah.
lot of the things around it were not clicking. And I think that now that they have a new voice and they've seen some growth over the course of the year, that maybe with a full year and a clean slate, there is something that they can build upon. Now, the question really comes, how much longer are you going to play this John Collins game?
They have to get rid
Because
of him
if
this
you really
summer.
want to win, him being a high commodity needs to be out of your mind.
Yes.
This thing with Landry Fields, where he still believes that he's a high value asset, you're depreciating his value.
Yeah.
You are. No, no, no. It's not that John Collins isn't a high commodity. The issue is that the production on the floor that you are putting him in the middle of is diminishing the returns you could get for him because the team is not built for John Collins in the mix anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
not built for that. And so therefore you are diminishing his value and therefore he is not showing that he is a high commodity. Therefore, no one is going to pay high value in the trade market for him. So it's getting lower and lower every year. If you don't pull it soon, there's no pulling it. And basically, you're going to be paying this man for cardio for 4 years.
Yeah. If it doesn't happen this season, this offseason, it's not gonna happen ever. Let's be completely
Never.
honest. It's just never gonna happen. Speaking of the bogey contract, though, he did get an extension before the playoffs started. 4 years,
That's
68
right. That
million.
did happen. Well,
Yeah.
I that shows that they must be confident in him
Yeah.
holding up, moving forward. That's a great point. I completely forgot that they did it right
Yeah.
before the playoffs.
Yeah.
But that's going to be huge because his health, it
They
could
need him.
really
They need
change
him.
the dynamic. They need a 3-point shooter. They need a knockdown guy.
Yeah, for sure. And that's definitely something to look at. I have a feeling, yeah, especially with the way, even if they do go on to five, I still think the way to end the season, there shows some sort of optimism. Again, we have no confidence they're going to win this game. I don't think they're not going to come back from a 3-1 deficit. But man, there's something there to go forward, and I think that at least Hawks fans can be like going into next season that there could be some sort of, saving grace, and that this team could definitely turn things around.
Yeah.
Another 3-1 series that happened in the East, and I'm surprised it's a 3-1 series at this point. The Knicks being 3-1 up on the Cleveland Cavaliers. What game 4 performance from both. Firstly, okay, I feel like this feels like a regular curse at this point, but Julius Randle in these playoffs, buns, absolute buns in these playoffs, man. I don't care what y'all say. This has been the RJ Barrett, Jalen Brunson show. I don't want to hear any talk about Julius Randle right now, man. Don't talk. This guy got benched for Obi Toppin in the fourth quarter. I don't want to hear any of that. But you know, good on the New York Knicks. They're up 3-1. Madison Square Garden was absolutely rocking in games 3 and 4. They were. It was a great atmosphere. They pulled the 2 wins, and now they're one game away from the second round, which is absolutely crazy. Jay, is there any hope for the Cavs to come back in the series?
Yo, Spider, don't you wish you came to the Knicks? Oh man, that's tough, dude. But like to keep it a bean with you, bro. I still think there's some fight in this, bro. I think at the
Yeah,
end of the day,
there is,
come
yeah,
on, bro. Darius Garland, he got the clamps put on him in game 3. Goodness
yeah.
gracious. And then Donovan Mitchell got the same work in game 5. I mean, game
Especially,
four, excuse
especially
me.
the second half. Yeah,
Yeah, especially, God, man. But TV, we again, I love going back to the previews because it's so many things that we discussed that I feel like are really showing its merit right now. The guard play for the Knicks is showing out, and it goes to prove that they addressed their issue. They addressed it internally by they addressed it internally by trusting in Emmanuel quickly. They leaned heavily, very heavily, to the point of like tampering level heavily
yeah,
into getting into getting a guy in Jalen Brunson on the team who has that dog.
yeah.
They get another guy in Josh Hart, who's big time at the guard position as one of
Big
the
time.
best rebounding guards in the league, and his versatility on the wing is huge. They address the guard position in a multitude of ways. They have a high volume scorer in Emmanuel Quickly. They have an all around 3 down back level point guard that can do it all for in Jalen Brunson. They have a dude with defensive switchability and some real in Josh Hart. I still really like what Quentin Grimes gives them in spot minutes. And RJ Barrett, the first 2 games,
Yeah.
let's not give him too much credit now. The first two
Yeah.
games were a little spicy, but game 3, that was that one. Game 3 was, I think, that game that we just needed from him to see, like, okay, RJ is engaged. Like he
Yeah.
he sees that there's this challenge ahead of him and is waiting for him to answer the call. And I think game 3 was a very big confidence booster. And I think it leaked over to game 4 in a big way. I think that if I had to put it on a scale from 1 to 10, I'm gonna put the Cavs coming back from 3-1 at a 6.
Yeah.
And that might be a smidget high, but I think it's just because the talent they have, I think, has just not played up to its potential yet.
Yes.
But I think that if they can unlock that, I think if the desperation clicks in enough, we're gonna get a big game from either Spider Darius or Evan Mobley.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, he's been kind of passive and it's getting to me, but I'm waiting for him to really get in the mix, because I think if he gets in the mix, he can break this whole series wide open. So
Hmm.
I'm leaving that out on the table as an open challenge for this man, because I'm telling you, if Evan Mobley locks in on the offensive side of the ball, he could break this whole series wide open. So I'm gonna put it at a 6. But the Knicks got the clampers out. They got the clamps, and they are ready for all. They are ready for all the smoke.
Man, I have to be. I kind of agree with you. I think I'm actually even higher than you on this. I think there's a 7, just because we haven't had a Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland like fantastic game together, and that's due, and they're due for that. Like both that's one of the most like dynamic backcourts in the league. We are due for both of them having a big game, and I just don't think that the Knicks are going to be able to match up with that. But man, what's disappointing me is that front court of the Cavaliers are just not gritty, are not grinding it out. They're not like gritting it out with any of those of the Knicks bigs, man. They should have the advantage. But the Knicks, especially Mitchell Robinson, he's just getting like fighting harder for the ball, playing hard defensively. Him by himself has been handling those two pretty handily, to be completely honest. So like if there's like the one thing that I came like into the series pretty worried about for the Cavs is the fact that the Knicks are just a more rugged and more, you know, playoff basketball type of team where they could just go out there, they can like rough you up a little bit, they're gonna be able to play all 4 quarters, and they're gonna make you like feel, you know what I mean? They're gonna like let you know that they're there, especially with Tom Thibodeau as the head coach over there. And the Cavs have not had a response. They've had a good Donovan Mitchell game, like multiple Darius Garland great games, and they're down 3-1. Mostly because even like the bigs, even though they're more talented than the Knicks per se, they're just not like out muscling them. They're not outpowering them so far, and that's been kind of like the disappointing thing to look at the Cavs. That and also Donovan Mitchell not really showing up for a couple of those games as well. But still, you just expect with like the talent that they have in the front court, potential like defensive player of the year candidate Evan Mobley. You have Jared Allen, who was a one-time also before. You just hope that there is like some sort of like resistance there on the front line, and there just hasn't been that this series so far.
TV. Avid listeners are gonna get sick of me saying this, but the Eastern Conference playoffs, in one word, physicality. It's
Yes.
across the entire first round. It showed its head, whether it's Joel Embiid's ability to allow himself to physically impose his will on the Brooklyn Nets in the games that he played and be able to really show out, to the point that even with the little measly quiet 20-point night, his impact as a physical presence in the inside was a big catalyst to Tyrese Maxey popping off, right?
Hmm.
And so on and so forth. You look at the Celtics, their switchability, the fact that they have a bunch of guys that are big bodies that can switch around and be able to make all of this coverage and be able to play 5 out, but still be able to handle themselves defensively on the perimeter. It's allowed them to get physical with Atlanta, and they don't have the physicality on the opposite end to respond to what the Celtics are throwing at them. I think the Miami Heat's entire 3-1 lead is built off of the fact that I think they have just been the more rugged team. And I think you mentioned it just now against the Cavs, the Knicks. This is Knicks basketball. It's a kind of
Yeah.
a weird way to it's a weird dichotomy, but like this is how the Knicks win basketball games. This is
Yeah.
how the Knicks have always really made a name for themselves as a playoff team, dating back to Patrick Ewing days and so on.
Yeah.
Is having a lead guy as their go-to guy offensively with a lot of competency and defensive pride
Yeah. Yeah.
on defense to maximize the talent that's on the roster. And that's exactly what they're doing right now.
100%. I mean, it's no surprise that each of these games that they won, they held the Cavs to under 100 points. That just tells you all you need to know about this.
Oh my gosh.
Has to tell you all you need to know about this series. But the Cavs, man, the talent is there. Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland have proven at different points of the series that they can absolutely take over games. When you can get both of them clicking, then they still have a chance in the series, and that's why I'm still pretty high that they could still do this. But man, the Knicks are making it really hard for me to really be convinced with that. But I'm still gonna give them a 7. Jay gave them a 6. I'm still gonna give them a 7. They're probably one of the more likely teams that can be able to come back from a 3-1 deficit. Let's move on to the West now, and I don't know. I feel like there's gonna be a bit less of discussion because I feel like more of these series are kind of over compared to the East side. We're gonna start off with the Denver Nuggets taking on the Timberwolves. Now the Nuggets were up 3-0, but that man Anthony Edwards won't quit. He absolutely took over that game. That clutch 3 at overtime was absolutely phenomenal. The Timberwolves got a game in Game 4, but it feels like the Nuggets are still in control of the series. Jay, do you give the Timberwolves any sort of chance from coming back in the series?
I'm gonna put this one at a 2. I think Ant is him. I really do.
Yeah.
I asked it last week. I'll keep asking it. Where's Cat?
I mean, the production has been better, but he just still hasn't made his imprint on the series.
But that's the key. I haven't. I don't think we've felt Cat in this series.
Yeah.
There's a difference between Julius Randle right now, for example, who's another guy who I feel like has given us spurts in this series against the Cavs, but has not imprinted that he's like the all-star caliber player of the group for the Knicks.
Yeah.
But I think that I think Cat is somewhere in that range of a guy who I think has underperformed with a gear we know is there and haven't seen.
Yeah. I don't know. You're right. It's just like, yes, I mean, like ever since the last episode, like, I think Cat hurt us because he actually like performed better.
Yeah.
But it just feels like Anthony Edwards has been the one who has really been like leading the charge for his team, and it feels like even with Cat's better performances, it feels like it's like Anthony Edwards or bust for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and that's what really the case was in that last game. I have to agree with you. I'm at right now at a 2, just because Ant can do it. We've seen it, like, especially in Game 4 and almost in Game 3. They almost were able to pull out the win. But man, it just feels like they're just like the other guys around the Timberwolves are just not giving enough. I think what this shows for the Timberwolves going forward, man, Anthony Edwards, build around him. He is gonna be that guy for years to come. There's a reason why guards absolutely dominate the league. Could be one of those guys going forward. But man, Cat, you just haven't been giving us anything. And honestly, the Denver Nuggets, they've been just doing as business per usual. They're giving us exactly what they're giving us in the regular season. Lots of offense from different guys. Jokic absolutely feeding them. But man, the Timberwolves, they could have made it closer. Same thing with last year. They had opportunities to keep it close. They just haven't been able to really take advantage of those opportunities. But Cat's been doing great. Sorry, not Cat. Ant has been doing absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
He has to be the guy they build with going forward.
Now, I wish that the thing about this series is I just wish this is one of those where you look back at Jalen McDaniels and Nas Reed and just ask yourself how much more interesting this series could be if they had those guys available.
Yeah.
But I still think that at the end of the day, if Carl Anthony Towns was going to play to this caliber, I don't think they were ever safe. I do think this ends
Yeah.
in 5. I would not be surprised if Game 5 was extremely competitive, all things considered. But I do think that this is a series that, if you look back, could have been a lot more interesting with their other two guys available. But I think the wild card is, and I think something that you mentioned with the whole building around Anthony Edwards thing is we play the game every offseason of who's going to be the next
Yeah.
disgruntled guy, right? I don't know if Cat will be disgruntled, but I think the offseason should be I think the offseason should have him at the top of the list in terms of the front office maybe not being as happy with him.
Yes, 100%. And that's something to look out for in the offseason
Yeah.
because it feels like the Denver Nuggets are just going to have this completely like in the bag, especially by tonight's game. But again, these past two postseasons have proved that Anthony Edwards should be the guy that should be being built around there in Minnesota. Another 3-1 series that has happened, and unfortunately, it had to do with an injury. The Phoenix Suns are up 3-1 against the Los Angeles Clippers. They won their last 2 games because Kawhi Leonard had another knee problem. Who would have guessed it? And this series is basically over. I'm gonna throw it over to you, but I currently have this at a 1. I have this at a 1.
We're on the same page, man. We're at a 1. Shout out to Russell Westbrook though. I mentioned
Hundred
this when
percent,
yeah,
100%.
when the trade first happened, I said this is the place that's going to be able to optimize your skill set in a way that is going to earn you the next contract that you were looking for. The Lakers were not that team, and it wasn't necessarily Russ's fault. I think there's aspects of it that were Russell Westbrook's fault. I think there's also aspects where you know what you're signing up when you add him to your team, and therefore I don't think their team was prepared around what those aspects are. I think the Clippers are prepared for the skill set that Westbrook provides, and therefore he has been able to really ball out in a positive way for them, not just during the regular season, but in this postseason, both with and without Kawhi Leonard on the floor.
Yes.
So shout out to Russell Westbrook because I believe that he has played himself into getting a legitimate look this offseason from a handful of teams that are going to need a point guard. And I think that there's still some fight in the tank left in him. And I think that all this postseason run is doing is reassuring us of that. But in terms of the Clippers' life left in this series, with Kawhi Leonard out, they're not. I mean, I don't think that Russell Westbrook is capable of winning a winner go home scenario game against this caliber of team on his own, essentially as the lead man. I don't think that is Russell Westbrook anymore, though.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, but like I mean, we could see we still see it. Like Russell Westbrook on his own can produce and surprisingly efficiently, but those games are still gonna be few and far between. He's been awesome this series though. He's been absolutely killing it this series. It's just the Kawhi factor. The Kawhi factor. It's happened year in year out with this LA Clipper team. Kawhi Leonard's injury problems just continue to persist, and that's what really just drags him down. Westbrook is really trying, but there's only so much one man can do when Devin Booker's having a phenomenal series, Kevin Durant's having a phenomenal series, and you're still getting like great production from both DeAndre Ayton and Chris Paul. He can only do so much, and it's as deep as this Clippers team is. I mean, you got a 42-point performance from Norman Powell, and that still really couldn't get you a win as well. So that kind of tells you a lot about that.
Oh my god.
That tells you a lot about the Clippers right now. But man, Kawhi Leonard's injury really did hurt this, and it was a fun series. It was honestly going to look like one of the most fun series of the first round. But once the Kawhi factor went away, all the juice came out of the series. We're both at a 1. I don't think there's like really much hope for the Clippers now. I don't even know what. Again, the discussion of what they're going to do in the offseason will come later. But man, they have to take a good look at these 2 stars going forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. That'll be a great conversation to have about the Clippers. Is not even just what they do this offseason, but I'm gonna be real, bro. Especially with Shea's ascendance specifically this year, I think we're going to really start pushing the envelope on that tough convo of like, was that trade like arguably like the biggest L since the Brooklyn Nets trade with the Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett thing. I don't think it's there yet because
Yeah.
I still think that the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden theoretical team is still the
Mhm.
biggest failure in terms of trade acquisitions, and then to a certain extent free agency acquisitions
Mhm.
since then. But I think when you talk strictly in terms of just trades alone, they mortgaged a lot. They mortgaged a ton of their future assets and a guy who has now reached all NBA caliber potential. So it's going to
Mhm.
be interesting to not only just discuss what they do this offseason, but how do people feel about the run that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have went on with the Clippers. I think a really great question that'll come up this offseason is, do we even believe that Kawhi Leonard falls into the top 10 category anymore? Which feels crazy considering how
Yeah.
good we know he is when he's healthy. But that when he's healthy caveat is getting into like Anthony Davis level territory. And you already see the pushback from certain people where when we start discussing top 10, we're hesitant because we know that Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis is so injured, they threw up an injury graphic on TNT. You know what I mean? Like, it got that serious.
Yeah, 100%. I do think that with like the Kawhi Leonard Paul George experiment, like you mentioned like earlier, it has to be up there with some like the most like failed. I wouldn't say super teams, but most failed like terms of like full rosters. Because like when you like think about the depth that the Clippers have had, especially these last couple of years, all they needed was Paul George and Kawhi Leonard to be healthy for them to really be in the mix. But they clearly just are not able to do that. They haven't been able to do that ever since they joined the Clippers. So like you mentioned, one more year left on each of these guys' contracts. They're lined up absolutely perfectly. What are they gonna do now? I feel like at this point you've given up so much just to do that you have no choice but to run it back one last time and just let these like die out the way it is. But you're gonna have to think of something because they're moving into that new arena soon. Like that whole thing is gonna. You want to make this team marketable as possible. It's not looking that way right now, especially like with like the multiple like early exits in the playoffs, as well as the fact even the time that they had a chance to go further into the playoffs, Kawhi Leonard wasn't available. They were in the conference finals. Paul George couldn't do it all by himself. So yeah, I 100% agree. Like we mentioned, we're both at a one here. This series is over. One more series we're going to talk about before we move on to the final segment is a series once again upset, maybe not. The Los Angeles Lakers and the Memphis Grizzlies are again the 2-7 matchup, but the Lakers are up 3-1, and ever since those Dylan Brooks comments, the Lakers have completely OD'd and went off in the series. Jay, the way that I don't want to say the Grizzlies have dug themselves a hole. I would blame this mostly on Dylan Brooks, the way that he was bigging them up, him and the rest of the Grizzlies. But can the Grizzlies bounce back from this, especially against such a veteran team like the Los Angeles Lakers?
I'll give them a 4 TV, but I told you, the momentum is
Mhm.
snowballing. They might not deserve it. We could have a morality conversation all we want to about whether or not the Lakers deserve it or not. But
Mhm.
everything is snowballing in their favor, and that includes this. I'm telling you, the Lakers are positioned in a very scary way to maybe make a real run at this thing. And it starts with a series like this where when they came in, I told you, I said, I don't think they deserve to win the series. But I think when you look at how they match up with a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, they match up very well, and that bars well for them when you also add in the kind of momentum they've had over the last couple of weeks leading up to the postseason. Now they're here. Dylan Brooks poked the bear, so to speak, and so far, all it's done is put him on the bench with an ejection and his team down 3-1 with John Morant playing his heart out, coming off of injury last game, and it not even remotely making the game more competitive than what they won. I think the Lakers won by like what 10,
Yeah,
and Ja had like a 45-point triple double or something like that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So that just goes to show you how much this series might be out of reach from Memphis. I'll never count them out, which is why 4 I feel like is respectable,
yeah.
but Like you, bro. We had. I'm lost for words because it's like, bro, we had the conversation
Mm,
last pod. They might not deserve it, but everything is snowballing in the favor of the Lakers, and I feel like it's too hard to look at the series up 3-1 and think, oh, this is where everything comes to shatter to pieces.
yeah, and it might continue, man. Especially with the way like the next round is start shaping up, whether against the Warriors or the Kings. You can't tell me right now that they don't have a good chance against either of those teams with the way they're playing right now. But man, I have to agree with you. I might give it a bit higher. I'm gonna put it at a 5, just because I just feel like the Lakers. Every time you feel like something is like great is about to happen, it feels like it's like something like bad is bound to come. But so far, I mean, LeBron James playing absolutely fantastic. Honestly, the one player here that's been disappointing has been kind of Anthony Davis. He's had that like one like really good game in this playoff series, but besides that, he's been completely underwhelming. Fortunately for the Lakers, Rui Hachimura, Austin Reeves, those type of like role players that they've been stepping up in such a huge way. It's been they've really like given themselves like this extra cushion to be like, okay, Anthony Davis doesn't have to be at his best to play against his team because Austin Reeves is giving you like almost 20 a night. Rui Hachimura is giving you over 20 a night in this playoff so far. If they're clicking on all cylinders, then man, all that hate we were giving them earlier this season, man, we gotta start backtracking a little bit because they are clicking at the perfect time. Now the Grizzlies still got a chance, like I mentioned, they still got a chance. John Morant
Yeah,
is still that good of a player. That team as a whole, but
yeah.
man, at some point after all this talking, like there has to be a time where they just kind of stop and just like let the game do the talking. And so far, the talk isn't back at the game. Dylan Brooks has really kind of put this team into a pretty bad hole so far. And now he's not even talking to the media and stuff like that. It's just not a good look for the Grizzlies after not a good like PR year for the Grizzlies as well. It feels like this year is becoming like more and more of a disappointment the more it goes on. I got to keep it at 5 as well.
TV famous obituary words for the 2023 season. In quotation marks, I'm fine in the West.
Every time the Grizzlies lose the
Tough.
series, if you've been watching the recaps every game, I've been asking the Grizzlies every time they lose, are you still fine in the West? Clearly not. They're probably gonna get down pretty soon. Hopefully, at least they keep the series a little bit longer. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, the Lakers have full control of the series, man. It's been it's been fun for a lot of the outside the court stuff, but man, the Lakers have been taking care of business 100%. But yeah, those are our thoughts on each of the series and whether we think that the comebacks are possible. Let us know down below what you guys think. Final segment of the show. We did the quiz last week, and now we are bringing back the drafts, which has been a while, Jay. It's been a while since we brought back the drafts, but we have a good one here today. Are you ready for this one?
Yeah, man, let's rapid fire on this one. I didn't realize we've been going for a minute on this episode.
Yeah, 100%. But this is gonna be a fun draft. This is
Yes,
definitely gonna be a
sir.
fun draft. We are gonna be trying to draft the best possible lineups with only guys 7 feet or higher.
Let's get it.
Now, this is going to be a tough one
Get it.
because we have to make the best 5 man unit possible. And if you didn't know, mostly 7 footers are these centers. They bang down low, all that type of good stuff, like fight for rebounds. None of them are great dribblers, really. None of the, like, there's very few that are amazing passers. But we still have to try to make the best team possible over here. And what we're going to do, as we did with the last draft, serpentine. We're gonna go serpentine version on this. I'm gonna give Jay the first pick. I get the next 2 picks. He gets the next 2, so on and so forth. That's how serpentine works. But Jay, I'm gonna throw it over to you. Who is your first pick of this draft? Because technically, in this draft, I have a feeling we might not go with the best players, but fit's gonna be very important here.
Well, you mentioned not having dribblers, so I'm gonna try to get my dribbler out the way. Give me Hakeem, man.
Hakeem as your first pick. Very, very interesting. I like that. I like that. One of the best passing centers of all time. Good dribbler. 100% agree with that pick. This again. I mentioned this before. The thing. This would have been a perfect place to draft Jokic #1 because he's such a unicorn of a center. You know what? I'm gonna go with the modern day Hakeem Olajuwon with my first pick. Not one of the greatest players of all time, but I gotta go with it. Give me Joel Embiid. Give me Joel Embiid as my first pick,
I
which means
like
I
it.
also get the second pick here. There's so many good like 7 footers that can like just like be like actually really good centers. But I'm gonna go with one of the best athletes on the board. This guy, like, and all of his like records and all of his things feel like myths at this point because it's been so long ago. Give me Will Chamberlain. I think he could be a damn good three in this league.
Okay, I like that. I like that. I'm gonna go with the quote unquote PG. If I had to pick somebody in this grouping, I'm gonna go with Pau Gasol. I'm gonna try to get the passing out the way.
Okay, I like
I
that. Him and Akeem, and plus Pau can space the floor a little bit.
and to kind of okay, and to double up on terms of the floor spacing, I want Dirk Nowitzki.
He's literally my favorite, like one of my favorite boys of all time. I would have loved to have Dirk.
Yeah.
That's good. Oh, that's a good pick. That's a good pick. I need to counteract that shooting. And the guy who claims to be the best shooting big man of all time, we were basically putting him down this entire episode. But I'm gonna go with Karl Anthony Towns at my 2 position. You know what? I have like in terms of the backcourt positions with Embiid, Towns, and like the perimeter guys with Will Chamberlain, I feel confident in that. I feel confident in those guys.
All right. I think.
Wait. Oh, I have back-to-back
I
picks.
think you have a back-to-back.
Oh,
before you get to
I
your
got
last
back-to-back picks. Okay. This makes it interesting. You know what? Just give me the most dominating force in NBA history. Give me Shaquille O'Neal.
All right. So we got Hakeem, Dirk, Powell. I'm thinking Hakeem 2, Powell 1, Dirk 3. So technically, we don't have our big guys yet. Technically.
Yeah.
So I need Shaq now.
Wait, I just took Shaq.
Oh, that's right. You just
Yeah,
took
just
Shaq.
took Shaq.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need my fault.
Yeah,
Completely.
I know.
I have my heart set on that. I need Brooke Lopez now.
Oh, interesting.
I need Brooke Lopez now. I think he's gonna be my 4 because he can
Yeah.
space the floor. And my 5. Holy, this is a great one. Wow. I don't did we do this one yet? Let me get David Robinson. Let me get him as my 5.
I was
Holy.
I was thinking of going David
If I
Robinson
can't
just
get
'cause.
Shaq, let me get David Rob. I mean, Shaq used to kind of like give the Georgetown boys a lot of work. So I mean, whether it was Mutombo or him, it was gonna be a little bit of a toughie. But hey, like at the center spot, like let me get that. Fuck with David Robinson, double machine.
Yeah, quadruple double machine too. He had like 2 quadruple double games in his
True.
career as well. Oh, that was a bit a good one. I was set on getting David Robinson because I thought this guy was a given you're gonna get, and I can't believe that the best center of all time is gonna go as the last pick here. I cannot believe that. I feel like it would be an injustice not to go with him. Give me Kareem. Give me Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to play my 4. Yes, not as mobile as David Robinson, which I was hoping to get at that position. But man, if we don't take Kareem at this, that would be a crime not to have him on the board.
I feel like a casual for having my center position still open. Excuse me, and not taking Kareem. Wow. I think it's just my team. It's just my team. Okay, let's read our teams out. Let's read.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it over to you. How would you set up this lineup to the one that you have right now?
Ooh, okay, that's a really interesting question. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I've got Powell at the 1, Hakeem at the 2, Dirk at the 3.
Okay, fair.
Let's switch that actually. I'm gonna switch that around. I'm gonna put Powell at the 1. I'm gonna put Dirk at the 2. Your 2 guard is mainly supposed to be more of a scoring option.
Yeah.
Hakeem has a lot of switchability and he's a DPOY. Him being on the wing is probably better. So let's go Powell at the 1, Dirk at the 2, Hakeem at the 3, Brooke at the 4 as our stretch big / rim protecting center, and then David Robinson as our true 5 center as the rim protector and big time rebounder.
I like those picks. I do like them. In terms of my team, give me Joel Embiid at the 1. We need our best ball handler there. We need the 1. He's not the greatest passer in the world, but he's shown some great passing ability, so I will put him at the 1. Same with you. I'm going to put my best scoring option / outside option at the 2 and Karl Anthony Towns. At the 3 position, I was gonna put there. Oh my gosh, who the heck? I completely forgot who I picked for my team. Oh, Will Chamberlain, of course, the absolute athletic freak. I'm gonna put them at the 3. Give me Kareem at the 4. I think that like the 4 position, someone who was a bit better in the mid range, who Kareem was, and he could just operate, use the skyhook anywhere he wants anyway, so that's completely fine. And give me the big Shaq that's down low, gobbling up every rebound, being our rim protector, being just that intimidating force down low. How are you feeling about your team?
I like my team. Now the Kareem thing will be a debate. I think we can debate that one.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of just going with my team for position purposes, not too bad. Not too bad.
Yeah. I felt like, again, I was dead set. I thought you were gonna go 100% Kareem, and I was gonna get David Robinson because like he would have been absolutely perfect. But I could not leave Kareem on the board now. Come on,
yeah,
now.
bro. That's tough though. The fact that Kareem ended up being the last pick, but even we both use interbasket.net's like best 7-footers list, and Kareem's number 1, but he was our last pick in the entire draft.
Exactly.
Feels crazy.
It does feel crazy. But yeah, these are 2 very good teams. Let us know down below which team do you think wins in this battle. And yeah, just give your thoughts on any of the other topics that we discussed today. Jay, we have reached the end of an episode. Another great one in the books. Do you have anything to tell these beautiful people before we sign out?
Bro, the NBA playoffs has been, oddly enough, exactly what we expected in all the opposite ways. It's been as parody-filled, drama stuffed, and as insanely entertaining as we could have expected. I just think the teams that are in the lead right now probably weren't the teams we were anticipating.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you love about the NBA, the transparency, what's it called? The parody around the league. It's just been like so great to see this playoff so far, and we're going to be covering it all on this podcast. Be sure to look out for the double uploads this week again. We will definitely have one by the end of this week to cover a lot of the series, which will probably be over by that time too. So we're going to be definitely covering those, and just look out for all of the daily content as well at Hit Your Free Throws podcast, YouTube, all the podcast networks, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. You'll be able to find us there for some great content going forward. But this is where we're going to end today's episode. Thank you guys for watching or listening. This is TV signing out with my co-host over there, Jay. Have a wonderful day. Take it easy, guys. Peace.
Peace.